My name is Erik Van Horn. I bought my first franchise in my 20s, and since then, I've owned 6 brands with 25 stores in 8 states. I've also helped 1,000 people find the right franchise for them. People like us who are not cut out for the 9 to 5 and like to work smarter, not harder. How do we find the right franchise, buy it, grow it, sell it, and how do we do it in a way to own the business without it owning us? Those are the questions, and I'm on a mission to give you the answers. Welcome to Franchise Secrets. Welcome to the Franchise Secrets podcast with your host, Erik Van Horn. And today's very special guests are my new business partners with Mighty Dog Roofing. And we want to talk a little bit about our journey and our story with Mr. Zach Beutler and Mr. Josh Skolnick. I don't know why I just called them Mr., but I did. Guys, welcome to the show.
Woo, great to be here.
Thanks for having us, Erik.
Yeah. Now, Josh, you've been on here twice talking about your other businesses. So why don't we go ahead and start with you? Just give us, actually, let's just go back to the beginning of, I remember being at a conference, a franchising conference with you, and we just kind of went off to the side and started to talk about kind of like your next thing and my next thing, and Zach was there too. And we were talking about like, let's do something together. And that was the beginning of where we are today in my mind. Do you guys remember that?
I do.
Yeah, I do actually.
I remember it like yesterday. I think it was Cincinnati. And we were there, and go back to that time or around that time. Like why did we even want to do something together? We all had good things going on with what we were doing. In your mind, why put a partnership together?
Yeah, I think, Erik, when I look back to that conversation, like you said, you, myself, and Zach, we've known each other for a while now through franchising. And, you've been very successful on the development side and helping people really find their dream of business ownership through franchising. And then I've been very successful as a franchisor, and Zach's been very successful not only as a franchisee, but also in development. And, as I phrase him, as the 800-pound gorilla in development. But at the end of the day, I think we've all really seen a lot of trends happening within franchising and the power of the service space as well. And when you just think about the value that our 3 minds together, along with everyone else that we surround ourselves with, it's really a force that's going to be very powerful within franchising. And so, in my opinion, that's really where those conversations began. I look back on all of the various franchise conferences that I've been to myself and the different franchising events. And, Zach and I always find ourselves being the guys that are really observing the entire room and making sure we talk to everybody and listening to what's going on, and, trying to do a lot more of the listening than the talking. And I think long term, it's really paid off for us because, we've been able to take in a lot of very valuable information that we're deploying today into our newest venture with Mighty Dog Roofing, and, many more to come in the future. I mean, this is just the start of really building something that's going to be special within franchising, not only from the franchisor side, but also from the level of success that our franchisees are going to achieve within the business, and just the way that we really care. And I think really a good segue for Zach is Zach loves to talk about the why, and he's been in franchising probably longer than I have, believe it or not, and you as well, Erik. And so I think it's great when we hear Zach talk about that why of, why he believes we chose to do this. And, our 3 visions are really in align in what we're doing next. So I'll let you take it from here, Zach.
Yeah, perfect. I was just going to say values. I remember back, and we always tended to focus on the same things. That why didn't brands do this, or wow, this some of these brands did this, worked really well. We always kind of, all 3 of us always could identify the things that were important to us that franchisors did, that Josh did from the start. And I think that's why Josh and we had such success with Monster and Redbox. But Erik, you and I always chatted. It was always this. We always had the exact same things that frustrated us, and we just couldn't get around why brands didn't do those. And I think this opportunity gives us a great platform to do the right things from the beginning, that don't just create long-term or short-term cash flow for franchisees, but long-term wealth.
I think that's great. One of the other things that we talked about, from like way back when we all first started to get to know each other, and I know you and I, Zach, for sure, when we look at brands, as I've helped so many people buy brands over the years, pointing them in the right direction, I look at a brand, a new brand that is poised to do really well. They have franchisor experience. Somebody in on the leadership team, preferably a founder, has franchisor experience. It's not their first time into franchising. They have somebody in the founder team or at least deep in the leadership team that has industry experience. And with us, we have franchisee experience. We're bringing, like 8+ brands of being a part of, like, intimately being on the inside as a franchisee. We're bringing that to it. So at Mighty Dog, we're looking at it from the franchisee standpoint, the franchisor standpoint, and industry standpoint. And that's why, we looked at Josh, and it was just a great to have a partner like Josh that's not just done it once as a founder of a brand that was his, grew it into a really great franchise called Monster Tree Service, but then he bought into another brand and is really growing that one. Josh, why don't you tell a little bit about the second journey of why did you choose to get into a brand that already had some units open, or it wasn't a mom and pop, it was a franchise at the time, right?
That's correct. And one last thing I want to add just on the prior topic is I think one of the things that really sets the three of us different in the foundation of what we're building in not only Mighty Dog Roofing, but our future ventures is that, while a lot of people in franchising are very focused on selling more franchise units and opening up as many franchisees across the country as they can, one of the things that I've always put a core focus on, and we're going to continue to do into the future as a franchisor, is how can we offer services to our franchisees to help improve their overall experience as a franchisee within the system, and long term, make sure that they're getting the return on their investment that they've made with the business, but more importantly that their expectations of what they believed were going to happen through the development process actually do take place. So like you'll always hear me say the line, I as a franchisor believe that we've got a fiduciary responsibility to deliver services and support that allow you as a franchisee to focus on things that make you money. And in the service business, that's sales and then the delivery of the service that you're offering. And if we can really allow our franchisees to focus on those two things, it's truly a recipe for success, while we're leveraging our experience and capital and power in the background to really evolve every other aspect of the business for our franchisees.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into each of those right now, because I think that's really important because we all are on the same page on that. So, expectation number one, what you just said, dive into one of those things a little bit deeper.
I always say, the franchisor, like myself, I've been very successful. You asked about, my venture in the two existing brands that I had, and Monster Tree Service was a company that I founded and developed to over 225 franchise units over a 6 to 7 year period, and successfully exited that investment in September of 2020 to the fifth largest private equity firm in the world, which rolled that into an umbrella company called Authority Brands, which currently has 8 home service brands. With Redbox Plus, we're in the waste industry. And again, north of 200 franchise units from 4 about 2 years ago. And so, when you think about foundation of what we're delivering, like I always say, we've had a lot of success. I and the teams that I've developed have had a lot of success around building large scale franchisors, but we're only 50% of the equation. I mean, the heartbeat of our organizations are truly the franchisees that are out there on the front lines every day, living and breathing the services that we sell and we provide to consumers across North America. And so for us, we take our job very seriously, but we also recognize that we're only 50% of the equation. It's all about the selection process that we follow through the development stage of bringing franchisees into the business. Erik, yourself, Zach, and I, we always talk about that. The way people act through the development process is a clear indication of how they will act as a business owner. Additionally, once they get into the business, and it's a big life change for a lot of people, because at the end of the day, you're now the boss. As long as you're operating within the confines of parameters that we lay out as the franchisors, the boundaries of what you need to follow in order to be in compliance with your business, it's on you as the franchisee to get up in the morning and do the right thing and hold yourself accountable. And again, we just really look for strong partners to partner with. And one of the things through development with Monster Tree and Redbox Plus that Zach and I did so well is that we were very upfront with people, and the fact that we always shared the good, bad, and the ugly, because we sort of lived and breathed by no surprises. We didn't want to have a bunch of surprises or unrealistic expectations once somebody gets across the finish line and really gets into the business. And there's so many other things that happen after that. But I know Zach has so much more to add to this, and I can see him chomping at the bit to get his thoughts out as well. So go ahead, Zach.
Zach, you have so much experience in this. And I wanted to say for the audience, like Zach and Josh, you guys have been working together for a longer period of time. And you guys have had a really, really good working relationship before you became official business partners. And I'm in that mix now as well. But yeah, Zach, you have a tremendous background. You've helped, more people than most anybody in development get into really good franchises. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think it's important to remember that candidates go through a development process for any franchise, and they're building this vision in their head of what it's going to be like after they sign those papers and they open up. Like, what is their day going to consist of, and what's it going to be like to own that particular franchise? And development, is made to be as sexy as it can to entice as many candidates as possible.
Development's a fancy word for selling.
It is a sales process. And there's a lot of laws to protect buyers, which are very good to have in that process. But at the end of the day, it is a sales process. But you have to be very careful because you want to make sure that the reality of what it's going to be like as a business owner reflects in that development process. And I think that's where, Josh, validation comes into play. When you first place franchisees, people are going to want to talk to them about what it's like. And if you can't meet that expectation, you can't really continue that volume of selling anymore. So it's very important that you not only paint a very clear picture of what that support and performance is going to be like, but you back it up with the support that you give those franchisees.
Pause there because I've been as an area developer, regional developer, master franchisee for three different brands where I was on the selling side, the sales, the development side, but the franchisees that I would bring in, I had to support. They were in my region. So in many ways, I was a mini franchisor. I was acting like a franchisor in a region. And it's different when you are the one that selling franchisees coming in and what their expectations are. It doesn't have to be, what their expectations are, and you want them to have clear expectations or realistic expectations as they become franchisees. And one of the things is like marketing right now. I mean, we are putting together some really incredible marketing things for our future franchisees. And we have to be careful to not overpromise because we've seen in the past where franchisors overpromise, whether it's intentional or not intentional, it happens out there. And that's that's probably the first thing that franchisees, once they get into a franchise and now they're partners with that franchisor, their expectations were not what they thought they were going to be. So I think as we are designing things from day one, that Josh brought up a really great point. Expectations. We want expectations to be as accurate as possible for our franchisees. And that starts with the sales process and then finishing talking with franchisees as you're going through it. But I like what Josh was saying with, the expectations and what's the expectation of a franchisor. And Josh has done a great job at this. And the franchisor, like what sort of expectation of a franchisee be of a really, really good franchisor, Josh?
The expectation is going to be that you're going to get a high level of support and services from the franchisor. And one of the things to keep in mind in what we're creating through Mighty Dog Roofing as the first venture the three of us are doing together is that we're doing things substantially different than the way an emerging brand would do it when it's their first time. I mean, we already know the playbook and we know exactly what franchisees need to be successful. So we have already built the entire house before we're going out there to the masses. So, you talk about the marketing that we're developing and the marketing is so robust. We're going to come out into markets across North America where franchisees are going to open their doors and have a brand image like they've been around for the last decade. There's going to be immediate consumer confidence by the way that the business is really presented to the general public, not only on a residential level, but also on a commercial level. And then internally, they're going to have the support that you typically wouldn't get unless you were working with a very robust franchisor that's reached a mature state where they have over 100 franchisees in their system. I mean, when you look at the way that we're starting this thing, the number of employees, the amount of overhead that we've got right out of the gate, it doesn't make any sense for the franchisor. But we can't worry about what makes sense for the franchisor. We have to worry about what makes sense for the future success of the franchisees. And what we don't want is we don't want franchisees that come into the system, after we reach 50, 100, 200 units that are getting something completely different than the people that were the early adopters. And so, from all of the lessons that we've learned in our prior ventures, we want to eliminate that step and just have people step in day one into a robust operating system with all of the systems and support in place to really ensure the highest level of success.
Well said. Zach, any comments on that or thoughts?
I actually had a good conversation today. So, you know, building out several brands and watching franchisors build their FDD and more importantly, the item seven.
So what's the item 7?
So the item seven is the estimated cost to launch of any franchise. And for franchisors, typically try to keep that as lean as they can so that it looks like it costs less to open it so they can appeal to more candidates. And we've done the opposite.
Real talk right here. Anyone listening, if item 7 is what the typical startup expense, a typical franchisor is going to want to minimize that as much as possible to attract as many people as possible to see the investment is lower. And so I just wanted to bring that point because it's a really, really good point. And it gives the listeners insight into as they're doing their own due diligence on item 7 and the estimated startup expense, you need to ask franchisees, is that accurate? And it may or may not be, but this is something that's really important. So now let's zoom back into where we are at Mighty Dog when we're building the item 7. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, so there was a couple. There's three big things that I think of, and well, the first is what's called additional funds or working capital. We had a good discussion on what it is, and then we said, well, let's just double it, and why not? And the reason for that is when people go for financing, we want them to number one have enough capital to launch the business, but we want them coming in with a large buffer so that they need to make an investment into another vehicle to grow the business right away or hire that extra person or they land a huge project that's going to take them 3 months to get paid, they have the ability to do that runway. And that raises the overall cost.
When you said double it, why not? It wasn't a flippant, why not? We may as well just randomly pick a multiplier of 2. It was because when you get into business, most things are more expensive than what you realize. And franchisees out there listening to this right now, you're just I can see you nodding your heads because it's more expensive than what you thought it was going to be. But to the point, we want franchisees to get out of the gate and start really strong. To be able to do that, you have to have the capital to be able to deploy the resources to be able to have the revenue coming in so you can do what you want to do in the business to be one of the top performers. So keep going, Zach.
Yeah, so that's a big one. And I think one of the things that we found, Josh, is that high performers come out of the gate swinging and they could continue to snowball into more volume, but it takes a little bit extra money to make that money. So rather than having them have to wait to generate that cash, we can help get those high performers off the ground faster. On the flip side, the low performers, and not everybody can be a high performer, they have a bigger bandwidth to make their business successful. So that's a big one. The second one, this is the first time I've ever even seen it done, but we've front loaded a lot of the first year's advertising cost into that item set. We have two strategies. We built out a long-term marketing strategy to become that 800-pound gorilla in the marketplace through SEO and micro lead generation. And we've actually built the first year's cost into that item 7. So again, it raises the cost a little bit more, but you don't have to pay that on a monthly basis with the cash flow you're making from the business. So that improves cash flow.
And I think transparency is a word that we want to use here because we want to be very authentic and transparent with what we're doing. I think this goes into who we're looking for as candidates, as future franchisees. Because if you want to do everything in a shoestring, if you don't want to be one of the top performers, if that's not you, this is probably not going to be the right brand because we want to do things with excellence and do it right and spend money on things that actually move the needle, not just waste money. Like an example of SEO, a search engine optimization. We could have that's a fluff in a lot of marketing agencies and a lot of brands out there, franchise, non-franchises. SEO can be done really, really well, or it can be done as an afterthought and it's not effective as an afterthought. But SEO done really well is a really, really good strategy. And most people don't really understand it or take the time to invest into it. And we have one of the best at working on SEO, and not just at the franchise or level, but at the franchisee level, because we want our franchisees to have their site, ranked high in their market because we think it's important.
Absolutely, it is. And I think to kind of close the conversation on item seven, one of the things that I've always been a firm believer of is that, we don't want to work with people that can just, by a shoestring budget, afford to get into the business. Because what we're not doing is we don't want to sell somebody an initial investment that they don't have the financial wherewithal to continue to reinvest. And so a lot of times you'll hear people talk about, well, the business is going to kick off enough money for you to continue to invest in the business. But I'm a firm believer you don't always want to take that approach from the sheer fact that you want to have some cash reserves to make big decisions. And more importantly, you also want to be able to take an income from the investment yourself. So you don't want to always have to reinvest, 100% or a large chunk of what you're generating as far as a profit into continuing to build your business. While many do, that's okay. But we want to make sure that we're very clear on what's this investment look like, not just beyond that first 90 to 120 days. What are you going to be doing in your second year in business and your fifth year in business to be able to continue to grow? And as we, grow out this business and others, the validation is so important for the candidates that are coming through the process to really hear from others that went before them to even say, listen, I made this mistake or I made this decision and it was the right decision, or I should have done this better. And but what you always learn as the franchisor, and it sounds cliche, is that what really makes a top performer in a franchise system, and it's someone who drinks the Kool-Aid. They follow the process, they make the investment, and they follow that playbook. And that's really what franchising is about, is that we want people that can focus on the things that make them money, sales and production of the service that you're selling. And if you can really come into a business and focus on that, you will do really well. But obviously, you've got to have the trust and the experience and the confidence in the franchisor that you're working with. And like we always say, when we look at directors of operations within the industries and the businesses that we're part of, we always put people in there with a tremendous amount of experience that have personally done everything that they're asking you as a franchisee to do. And I think that's important because what happens is that creates a model of systems and processes that don't just sound good, they work. They've been proven, they've been executed out there in the field, and it's going to work for you. And that is so important in everything that you're doing.
I think that's a great point because there's things that the franchisee needs to focus on, and there's things that the franchisor can choose to focus on and take it off of the franchisee's plate. And that's where, one of the things that we've seen is we've seen some of the best and some of the worst in franchising. And some of the best franchisors out there are taking things off the plate of the franchisee so the franchisor can do it at scale. Josh, you've done it before. Recruiting. If you can help, like, well, just one of the biggest things that I get when I talk to people about the roofing franchise, where do you find people? We just take a play out of your playbook, Josh. You have a recruiter. You tell people about like what you've done at your other franchise.
One of the issues that we saw early on with Monster Tree Service was that our franchisees were so busy in the day to day of their business that they didn't continue to recruit for new people, but there was always a need to hire more people because there was an unbelievable flow of work coming in their doors. So in 2017, we established a full service recruiting department, which, we did all of the advertising and sourcing of employees for our franchisees, and we would turn over applicants for the franchisee to do the interview and the actual final hiring process. So we were very cautious to make sure that there was no issues related to joint employer liability within franchising, and made sure that we followed proper steps to be above board in the way it was being handled. And what we saw was the unit level economics of franchisees first, second, and third year in all of those buckets we published in the FTD and item 19 continued to grow year over year. And there was a much better pace of growth within the overall system. So when we look at Mighty Dog Roofing, like you said, there's really going to be three major fears of anybody looking at this business. And the first is going to be, how do I find people to provide the services for me, whether that be employees or subcontractors? How am I going to get customers? And is there truly a need for another roofing service within my market? And the answer to all three of those get handled very quickly because A, we're going to have a full service subcontractor recruiting department that's going to go out there bilingual to help you source all of the best subcontractors within a marketplace. On top of that, we've got partnerships with the major suppliers and vendors of all of the products that we'll be using that are going to even give us lists of the top customers that they have as a vendor that they're working with that do subcontracted work within in the place for other contractors that do what Mighty Dog Roofing is going to do. Marketing, we already touched on it. Marketing, we're going to knock it out of the park. Brand image, like you've been around for decades in a market from day one. And then is there a need for another roofing service within the market? Absolutely, because think about how fragmented the business is. Think about service in general. The last time you had to call somebody, how frustrating it is. We never wake up in the morning and look forward to calling an exterior contractor because we have a roof leak or our gutters are clogged or we need them replaced or whatever it might be. And so I always say to people, think about the way that you as a consumer buy on a personal level on a daily basis. And prior to COVID, what did we do? We want to go somewhere, we'd get an Uber or a Lyft. We need, something for the house, whether it be, you run out of shampoo, you take a shower last night, you use the last pump of shampoo, and guess what? You just open up your Amazon app and it's at your doorstep within 2 days on Prime. And so what we do is we develop a process to where, we're not growing the roofing market and the exterior service market in every market we're going to go to. We're just making it a much easier transactional process for the consumers and grabbing our piece of the pie. And that's exactly what our franchisees will do in the market. And it's been the exact same with Monster Tree. It was the exact same with Redbox Plus. And we're doing this with Mighty Dog Roofing. And, at the end of the day, it's going to be a matter of how much are you willing to invest as a franchisee to grow your business, grow your sales staff, and become an 800-pound gorilla within the marketplace.
Well said, Zach. Anything to add to that before we shift to EOS?
I think there's two thoughts when somebody franchises their business. They first think, "Well, I can't wait to get to that 100-unit mark. That's where I really want to get to." And what they forget about is they figure out how to get to 100, but they're not making the investments along the way to get to 300, to 500. And Josh, I think that's where you've always had the big picture mentality where I think we had 10 units or some 12 units with Monster when I first started. And we were hiring recruiters and you bought this building, this huge facility. And I'm like, God, yeah, let's do it. And that's, I mean, we just saw it together and other people were like, why is he doing that? The business doesn't support that type of infrastructure. But what we saw was 3 years of year over year increase in average unit volume because you made the investments into the franchise system that got people past that $500,000 mark, then to the $1 million mark, et cetera. And guess what? That helps sell franchises a lot.
Because it gives them confidence that this is a company that is, because most franchises, they never get to that 100-unit mark. I mean, and Josh has done it twice already. Most never get to that 100-unit mark. And that's why everyone goes after that 100-unit mark and they don't look beyond that. But if you start putting the infrastructure in place before you even really launch and you have the experience and the trust, just the clout in the franchise world, I mean, that's what we're doing here at Monster. I mean, what would we just do with the building?
With Mighty Dog Roofing, it's everything that was done with Monster, with Redbox, and in establishing all of those systems and services up front. And like we just, as we're launching development here in the first week of November of 2020, we just settled on a large scale office complex out in Omaha, Nebraska, which is going to be the foundation of building this business out of. So that'll be built out custom to the brand. It'll have everything to house our staff, provide our trainings, and just the ongoing day-to-day support to our franchisees. From a personnel standpoint, full suite of, in the executive side of things, we've got a full suite of executives in place. We've got operational support, debt recruiting. I mean, you talk about, it's like that old saying, if you build it, they will come. And that's exactly what we're doing. And to Zach's point, like when he looks back to when we first started working together and he's scratching his head going, this doesn't financially make sense based on where we're at, but yeah, absolutely, let's do it. But you have to recognize that you're running a business, you're building an organization, you're thinking into the future. It's the same thing that Fortune 500 companies do. They plan, they budget, they project. And one of the things I always tell franchisees when you get into the business too, like when you have, franchisees that want to try to do everything that they're doing in their business and really be penny wise and dollar foolish, I remind them to say, you're running a business. Do you want, do you want to work out of your home for the next 10 years? Or do you want to have a nice industrial building where you've got a warehouse space for your vehicles and an office space for your staff that you can now begin to grow and have a much bigger image within your market, as well as attract some high caliber employees that are going to want to do business, employ with you and do business with you because of the fact that, you are a real company. Those subcontractors that are performing services for you, are they coming to your house to meet you, or are they coming to an office that you have, or how's that being handled? So preparing is so important in anything we do. And one of the other points that I'll add is that something that makes things very successful for the overall relationship, franchisee and franchisor relationship, when you take an approach where you are proactive versus reactive, what happens is your time as a franchisor is spent doing things that benefit the greater of the entire system, as opposed to being a fireman and reactive and putting out fires all day because you didn't plan and you didn't prepare properly. And Zach and I could tell stories, and Erik, you could tell stories for days of, you know, individuals that have spoken to us at different events. I mean, it's no secret that we have been mentors to many people within the industry, and they've come to us for advice, and they've come and asked a lot of questions on, wow, you guys have been very successful in X, Y, and Z. Talk to me about my business and what can I do differently. And it's amazing when you sit there and you talk to people and they say, well, why would you do that? Or like, that's got to be expensive. And it's like, these are things that you can't afford not to do, as a franchisor to really begin to, continue and begin to really grow your business. But more importantly, deliver the level of success that your franchisees are going to have out in the marketplace.
One of the things that I know that you're passionate about, Zach, because you and I've had numerous conversations around it. Well, two things. One, the entrepreneur operating system, traction, EOS. And the other thing is just business 101, like basic business training. Why don't you talk, choose which one you want to talk about and give us some insight into your mindset around that and why.
I think it's the same to an extent. So I was a franchisee at 21. I think first year was well over $1 million in revenue, making I think $300,000-$400,000 a year, and just thought I was king of the world. And at the end of the day, when looking back, had no idea really what I was doing. We weren't tracking KPIs. We were just how much can we sell, how much money can we make on each sale. That worked up until it didn't. And and that's where one of my favorite quotes is, "Good decisions come from experience, and experience comes from bad decisions." And so there was a lot of bad decisions made there, but well, I don't know how. I mean, over 1,000 placements. I look, and most of those people are first-time business owners, and you don't just know how to run a business day one. And franchisors don't give you a playbook of how to be an entrepreneur. They give you on how to run their system, but when it comes to cash flow, profits and losses, like Josh is saying, investing in that business so that you can get to the next level, they don't teach you that. Hiring, firing, you get that stuff through experience. And it's crazy when you get a current business owner that comes through the process, they don't ask the same questions that the other candidates do that have been there for the business. But that's where, from what we've learned, and Josh, you'll know this too, is we started doing the traction process through the corporate side. And I've done the traction with all my businesses. And
Give the listeners a bit on traction. What is traction?
so Traction is a book and process created by Gino Wickman, and it's an entrepreneurial operating system. So what it does is it creates a clear line of vision for the organization. It puts people in the right seats on the bus, but also gives them clear measurables on how they're performing, responsibilities. You create meeting structures. It's really when somebody hands you a complete EOS process, it's okay, here's how you run a business, not that specific business or this franchise, but it's here. Here's how you run a business. And it's universal, and it creates a lot of accountability and transparency with an organization.
Transparency and accountability. Go back to a few weeks ago. or months ago, however long it was, you were saying, who's going to be responsible for this? And looking at Erik and Josh and some of the other leadership, John and the leadership team, like somebody has to be responsible for this thing. If this doesn't happen, this doesn't get done the right way. Which one of you guys is going to take responsibility? And so none of us could hide. But that's what this franchise is going to be. A leadership team where it rolls up and everybody has accountability to something or to somebody. That way nothing slips through the cracks. And I see it different franchise organizations and businesses in general. There's a lot of places to hide for people. And that's where things don't get done and things don't get done in a timely manner. And so we're action takers. Like when I look at the three of us and our other partner, like we are action takers. Something needs to happen. We just get it done. Zach, I'm so glad you were the champion of wanting to bring the EOS entrepreneurial operating system into this. And it's not just for us, but we're going to have our franchisees are going to be working with us as well, right?
Yeah. So when you buy into a Mighty Dog Roofing franchise, you're honestly going to get a playbook of not just how to operate the software and everything else, but it's going to have a scorecard of every KPI that you need to track on a weekly basis, when and how to hold the meetings with the employees. There's software that accounts for all the to-dos, all of the issues and everything else, but that's just given to you. And that accountability makes it a lot easier to run a business. But that's where I think franchisors overlook is that they've already ran this business. They've already got that experience of what to do, but you don't really hand them a playbook of, hey, here's how we suggest you run this business on a day-to-day basis.
This is working on your business and not in your business. And I know, Josh, you are, fantastic at this, and all of us are. We wouldn't be here today if we didn't know how to work on our business. But Josh, anything to add to working on your business as a franchisee or EOS or Business 101?
Yeah, I think the last thing I'll add, just short and sweet related to it, is it's really helped us to make sure that everyone stays accountable. Everyone knows exactly what they're responsible for. But weekly, when we hold our meetings and as we're working this with existing franchisees, it's very powerful to make sure that everyone's accountable. They know their numbers, and no one can hide. So, simply put, it is a process that is worth running in your business, and you will see immediate change.
So what we wanted to do, the point of this episode was just to give you insight into my life, my business partners, what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And so we'll come in here periodically to give the listeners an update, the inside scoop on what's happening at Mighty Dog Roofing. But no one really gets that. No one gets the inside, like as a brand is born, what's happening, how they did it, why they did it. And then we'll just, come back here periodically to give the listeners, updates. Does that sound good to you guys? And any last parting thoughts for the listeners?
I don't have any final thoughts myself, Erik. I think we covered a lot of stuff in this session, and the listeners have a lot to take away from, and really just look forward to the opportunity of continuing to not only build businesses with the two of you guys, but working with franchisees that as I said earlier in the call, it's really the heartbeat of any organization, and really helping people realize that benefit of business ownership through franchising. So I appreciate both of you guys taking the time to do this together.
No, absolutely. Erik, we've always talked about there's a lot of resources out there to be a better franchisor, a better franchisee, or a better business owner. And I think from all three of us, I mean, anybody could reach out at any time and we point them in the right direction. But don't be afraid to ask, not necessarily ask for help, but how can you do it better? It's a great question to ask.
The three of us are learners, and you heard it said earlier, and I'll leave with this final thought. We go into a room and we don't need to be the loudest person in the room. We don't need to be the person that everyone needs to flock to. We are watching and learning. And the more that you can get into rooms and ask questions and learn from people, the better off you'll be. And here we are, the three of us starting this franchise because we got to see each other from afar, how we related to each other, how we related to others, and just the reputation that we have. And so all you out there, just keep on learning, keep on growing, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.